Hey guys, so this video is not about ripping off Sam's style, but looking at some of the techniques that he might use to create his images and applying some of those to your own look. So it's becoming a very popular look, this faded portrait style, and make sure to go follow him on Instagram and on YouTube, and let's get straight into it. Let's start by just increasing the contrast a bit. He has a very flat looking image, but there is still quite a few blacks. That's why people say he has no contrast, but he still does have a lot of darks in his images. So dropping the blacks, and we're gonna drop the vibrance. And a little bit of saturation. Alright, tone curve. Pretty typical, but you want to get the fade just right. Bring down those whites. And we're a little over faded at the moment. We'll most likely have to come back to the curves. So HSL slider, moving it to the orange. Orange is a little towards the reds. Greens. And we're going to bump up the magentas. Right, onto saturation, bringing most things down. As you can see, the image is looking really flat, which is what we want at this stage. Bring the blues down. Bring up the purples, we want those flowers to pop. Maybe some magenta. Alright, so we're looking pretty good so far. Gonna up the luminance of the reds. And we're gonna bring down the oranges, but she's gonna go pretty dark. And then we're gonna have to bring that back with some brushing and some filters. Bring up the yellows, greens down a bit, aqua, blue down, purples, and a bit more magenta. So those flowers are really popping at the moment. And for after so far, so split toning, we're going to leave split toning. He uses very little, if any. Sharpening, I'm going to bring down. Has a very, very soft image. And I'm going to enable profile corrections. Only did a little bit. Don't even think it did anything. And coming down, we are going to put a pretty decent vignette on it. but then we're going to shift midpoint around this so it gets a bit more of an edge on it. It's more of an oval now. Feathering, and what this highlights one does, it just takes the vignetting out of the highlights. So we don't want these really dark corners. So lifting that right up, and now we've just got our vignette on the lower half of the image like that. Grain, he uses quite a bit of grain, but I feel like it's very small. So I'm going to drop that to 10 and leave that as that. And what I've liked to use lately is quite a bit of dehaze. So I'm going to put a little bit in there. And just to show you guys what the vignette and the dehaze is doing. Right, so we don't need to do any camera calibrations. And now we are on to the retouching stage. So I'm going to grab radial filter, press Alt, and then come up here, reset it. And we're going to do a few on her face, as her face looks really flat at the moment. She looks quite tanned, but she still looks quite flat. Over here, her face is really nicely lit and has really nice roll-offs from highlights to shadows. So the first one I'm going to do is going to be right on her face here. Down there, and we want to mainly light up the left part of the face. Now I'm just going to have a random go at some things in here. Contrast. So you want the light to look really soft, so you don't want to be bringing down the blacks too much and things like that. Going to bring down the white so it's not quite as harsh. And a bit of blacks. Bring the blacks up a tad. And clarity, maybe a tad of clarity. And I'm going to leave that filter there. So now our face is a bit better lit, and there's still a few I want to do. So I want to really enhance the left side of her face, and maybe some of her neck and jacket as well. So what I'm going to do is up the exposure even more. Bit of contrast. Bring up the highlights. It's looking a little intense at the moment, but we're gonna bring down the shadows. Drop the clarity to make it look softer. And I'm going to drop the sharpness on the other side to make it softer as well. So hopefully we've got some nice soft light hitting the side of her face now. It's maybe a bit too much, but we might fix it later. And one more I want to do. So I'm going to put it over the entire face. And what I'm going to do, if you come down here and click Show Mask Overlay, the little box down there, you'll see the area it's changing, and I'm going to click Invert so it affects everything outside. So what I'm going to do, decrease the feathering a little. And I'm going to bring down the clarity. And really bring down the sharpening. What I'm going to do is actually just bring back some of that feathering. Just make it a bit bigger. Right, so now what I want to do is just do some brushing. So the first brush we're going to do is on her arm here. So to get really nice skin and contrast in the skin, we're going to add contrast into the skin with the brush. So brush in her arms, and maybe up the density if it's not brushing as hard as you'd like it to. And I'm just going to increase the contrast. In the side, I'm just going to try to put it in the shadows. And increase contrast. And now it's nice and dark in there, and you get this nice roll off from shadows into highlights. So you see a lot of that in his images. Right, so I also want to really bring out the hair and around her neck, and just to see where I'm brushing, I press the box again. Gonna do a little bit up there. Generally just where the light is naturally hitting her. And I want around her neck to be quite well lit. So for this one I'm gonna increase the warmth a little. And I'm going to click off this box so I can see the effects it's doing. So onto a bit of extra exposure. Bit of contrast. Got to be pretty subtle. I'm going to increase the whites, and it's just going to help those areas really pop. I'm just going to take down the exposure a bit. And I don't like how much I have up here. So I'm going to click the box. I'm going to click on erase, make my brush a bit smaller, and I'm just going to brush away a bit up there. And I'm going to get back into adjusting it, and I am reduce the whites a bit more, and I am going to leave that one as that. And now I just want to create another one and try to go through this nice and fast and not be too exact. But you always want the neck to be very well lit. Around the neck and collar, you just want to add a bit of extra light. what I'm going to do with this one is just increase the exposure. So now we can see her neck much nicer. And we've got one more brush I want to do, and you guys probably don't notice it, but her shoulder here is blending into the background. You kind of lose her silhouette, which I think is really important to keep. So I'm just going to put a very fine brush, make it nice and small. Maybe that's probably too small. Just going to brush along there, and then I'm going to just decrease the exposure. Increase the contrast, and maybe decrease the blacks, and we'll see how that looks. It looks pretty obvious because we know it's there, but if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't notice it so much. It is a little thick, but for time's sake I'm not going to adjust it, but you get the idea. Now we can see her silhouette a bit better. And the next thing we're going to do is the clouds. I want to bring back a bit of detail into the clouds. So he doesn't put a huge amount of color and sharpening and that into his clouds, but he seems to, if they are there, they have a little bit of detail brought out of them. So what I want to do, I want to just decrease the exposure a little, quite a lot, and then up the contrast, up the highlights, bring down the shadows. We're just trying to get a bit of contrast while still keeping the clouds nice and soft. We don't want to get it going there and just sharpen them and contrast them. And then white's going to bring up, and blacks I'm going to bring down. So I think our clouds are looking pretty good. We can see them pretty well, but obviously we have completely taken out her face. So what you do is come up here to brush, not the symbol of the brush, but the word brush, and then it will let you come down here, press erase, and it's going to allow you to brush away what you don't want on that filter. Super handy. Just to make sure I got it all. And done. As you can see, we're running into a bit of trouble there. Little dark spot off the side of her head. So we can try to fix it, but you can see, oh, it's just a whole lot of her hair is coming out to the side and it looks very dark. What I might do is just, again, go to brush, erase, Let's slightly erase some of it. But that might now look worse. Looks alright. So now, if we go before, after, before, after. So one thing that's annoying me now is these dark corners up the top. Sometimes people have them, but I personally don't like them, so I'm going to get rid of them. And what I'm going to do is just grab these little filters and just very slightly bring up the exposure until they go away. It's a bit too much. Make it a bit bigger. Probably want to mess with the feathering. And I just want to mess with the tone curve a bit more. I think we've got a little bit too much fade, so I'm just going to bring this black point down a tad. And then you can also try bringing down the shadows just a tad. And that just gives us a little more contrast and hopefully still keeping that really faded look. And one thing I'd probably do if I had more time would be bring back up these brushes and then just try to add more contrast into the skin. So I'd grab her arm down here and I'd maybe try dropping the shadows. I'd click off this little box so I could see what I was doing. And maybe just increase saturation. Maybe even lower the blacks a little. And then I'll do it to the other arm. Drop the shadows, up the saturation, maybe even a little bit of blacks. And you could do all sorts like that to her face as well. So now we've got a nice tan, a nice roll from the darks and the shadows over into the highlights of the skin, and it looks nice and saturated, nice and golden skin. So let's leave it as that. Here's our before and after. Before and after. So a really soft image, and we kept the sharpening in her face. We brought out her face with brushing and her hair and her arms, and we added a vignette down the bottom, really popped the flowers and just really kept that image nice and soft and flat. So that's about it, and thanks for watching. Make sure you go follow Sam on Instagram and on YouTube, and yeah, leave a comment on what you guys want to see. If you like this, I'd really like to hear about it. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.